She never imagined that a single mistake would change her entire life. In the middle of a crowded cafe, one slip of her trembling hands sent hot coffee splashing across the chest of the most feared man in the city. He was powerful, untouchable, and whispered about in every dark corner where his name carried weight like a storm approaching. She thought it was just an accident, something a hurried apology could fix. But in his piercing gaze, there was no anger, only something darker, stranger, and far more dangerous. That single mistake became the chain that bound her fate. Her life had always been simple, predictable, and marked by long shifts at the cafe that barely covered rent. She was a young woman from a modest background, often overlooked, her world revolving around survival rather than dreams. The cafe was her escape, a place filled with chatter, clinking cups, and the fleeting smell of fresh bread and roasted beans. She blended into the background, unnoticed by the city's elite who occasionally stopped in, except for the morning she collided with fate. That morning had started like any other. Rain drizzling against the glass windows, the dull hum of traffic outside, and her mind occupied with bills waiting on the kitchen table. She carried trays with careful hands, but exhaustion weighed her down. When the door opened, a sudden silence spread across the room. People shifted, their conversations cutting short, as if an unspoken command had fallen over them. That's when he walked in. He wasn't like the other customers. His presence demanded space, his tailored suit carried authority, and the shadows around him whispered of power that no one dared question. To her, he was just another face in the crowd, until she stumbled. Coffee spilled, cups shattered, and time seemed to freeze. Gasps filled the air as the liquid stained his clothes, each drop echoing louder than her racing heartbeat. She braced for anger, punishment, humiliation, maybe even the loss of her job. But what followed was something no one in that cafe could have predicted. Instead of fury, his expression shifted into something unsettling, almost calculating. His gaze lingered too long, like a predator examining prey. In that moment, she had unknowingly crossed a line into a world that would no longer let her go. From that day forward, her world began to unravel in ways she could not comprehend. The moment the accident happened, she assumed her worst fear would be the loss of her job, but soon she realized the incident had awakened something in him, a fixation that would not loosen its grip. The cafe staff whispered nervously after he left that morning, their voices trembling with the recognition of who he was. She heard fragments of his name spoken in hushed tones, as if saying it too clearly would summon him back. She tried to convince herself it was over, just a passing nightmare, but his presence lingered like an invisible shadow. 2 days later, she noticed a black car parked across the street from her apartment. It stayed there longer than it should have, its tinted windows reflecting nothing but the city lights. At first, she dismissed it, telling herself she was imagining things, until it appeared again the following night. Her chest tightened with unease, but fear kept her silent. She didn't tell anyone, not even her closest friend. Deep down, she knew what it meant. He was watching her. The tension only grew at work. Whenever the cafe door chimed, she flinched, expecting to see him. And then, one morning, he returned. He did not come alone. 2 suited men entered first, scanning the room with cold precision, before stepping aside to allow him through. The cafe seemed to hold its breath, every eye avoiding his, every conversation cut short. He walked directly to her, his gaze heavy, a smirk lingering at the edge of his lips. Without words, he placed a card on the counter and slid it toward her. His eyes didn't ask. They demanded. When she hesitated to touch it, his men's presence pressed down like a weight on her shoulders. Reluctantly, she picked it up. That night, curiosity battled fear. The card bore nothing but a phone number, embossed on heavy black paper. She tore it in half and threw it away, thinking that would be the end. But the following morning, Another identical card appeared tucked beneath her apartment door. Her breath caught, her hands trembling as she realized he had already crossed into her private space. He wasn't asking for her attention anymore. He was taking it. As the days passed, her life became a series of small intrusions that grew bolder with each step. Flowers appeared at her workplace, always without a name. Strangers seemed to follow her home, disappearing when she turned to look. Her landlord mentioned someone asking about her lease, her hours, her habits. The city, once a place of anonymity, suddenly felt suffocating, every corner a reminder that she was being claimed by a man she barely knew. Her fear deepened into desperation, but no matter how she tried to avoid him, he was always one step ahead. She changed her routine, took different buses, even considered leaving the city altogether. Yet everywhere she turned, there were signs of him. Proof that her attempts at escape were nothing more than illusions. The more she struggled, the tighter the web closed around her. One evening, after another long shift, she entered her apartment to find the lights already on. Her heart dropped as she realized she hadn't left them that way. On the table sat a single cup of coffee, steam curling upward, waiting for her. It was the same brand she served at the café. In that instant, she knew she was no longer being watched from a distance. He was inside her world now, and there was no going back. The night she found the coffee waiting for her was the night everything changed. Fear no longer lingered in the shadows. It stood directly in front of her. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body froze as the door behind her clicked shut. He was there, sitting in the corner as though he had always belonged in her home. His posture was calm, his expression unreadable, but his presence filled the small apartment like a storm cloud swallowing the sky. She struggled to form words, but none came. He rose slowly, each movement deliberate, calculated, and terrifyingly certain. His eyes never left hers, sharp and unyielding. It wasn't anger that she saw in them, nor kindness. It was something far more dangerous. Obsession. To him, she wasn't a stranger who spilled coffee by mistake. She was a possession, something fragile that he had decided belonged to him. Her breaths grew shallow as he stepped closer, closing the distance between them. The walls of the apartment felt as though they were collapsing, each step he took sealing her fate. She wanted to believe there was a way out, but the reality pressed down on her with suffocating force. He had resources, power, men who would follow his commands without hesitation. Against that, she was nothing but one woman standing in her own living room, trapped in a nightmare she never chose. When his hand reached for hers, she flinched, but he did not release his grip. His touch was cold, firm, leaving no space for refusal. In that moment, she realized the truth she had been avoiding. This wasn't a chance encounter, nor an accident spiraling out of control. It was a deliberate claiming, a decision he had made the instant the coffee spilled. The silence in the room was louder than any words could have been. Her life was no longer her own. In his eyes, she had already been taken. The days that followed blurred into one another, her sense of time dissolving as she was pulled deeper into his orbit. What began with a single accident in a café had become a life consumed by control. She no longer walked freely down the streets she once knew. Every movement was monitored, every choice dictated. The ordinary world she once clung to, her job, her friends, her small apartment, faded away as if it had never belonged to her at all. Yet beneath the layers of fear, a strange clarity began to form. She understood now that power wasn't just about violence or wealth. It was about the ability to erase someone's freedom without raising a hand. His obsession was her prison, and every moment she spent under his gaze tightened the bars around her. The city continued its relentless rhythm outside, but within his reach, time felt suspended, her identity rewritten by a man who believed he could own what could never truly belong to him. And in that silence, a deeper truth emerged. This was not simply a story of one man's dangerous desire, it was a reflection of a larger pattern, how lives are often stolen not by chance, but by systems of power, by the arrogance of those who believe they stand above consequence. She was not the first to be silenced, and she would not be the last. Her story lingered like an unfinished echo, forcing anyone who heard it to ask, how many lives are altered? How many voices erased because those in power believe they can take without resistance? How many ordinary people like her lose themselves to forces they never chose? The answer hangs heavy, unspoken, yet undeniable. Sometimes the greatest danger is not the violence we see, but the quiet certainty of those who believe our lives are theirs to control.